life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Vern, we've been talking about all kinds of things over the past few weeks, everything from religion to love to our jobs, and we've had some discussions off stage about how important it is to take these things that we've learned and actually use them in our lives. And you mentioned the value of reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. And reviewing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the tragedies of our adult society is once they've read a book or seen a seminar or a show, they want to see another one. I've seen that. Show me something else. Let's move on here. And that's one of the tragedies because I know, having been in the seminar, quote, business for years, the thing we hear all the time is that if I go to a seminar, spend my money and my time, it's all worth it if I get just one good idea that makes a difference. I mean, I know you've heard that. And that's not what really happens at those seminars. Because typically, the seminar format in our society has emerged as the place for quantum leaping. In other words, so many people in our community are not going to seminars and yet wonder why it is that some people drive the big car, have the big house, move forward with their life. And chances are they've gotten into the loop. They're going to these kinds of personal growth, professional development experiences, and they're coming out and exercising what they've learned. That's what a seminar does. It compartmentalizes, it compacts information that might take years to accomplish. I know, for example, I started intense research. I was conscious and wondering from the time I was 6 or 7. And then in 1957, when I had to be, when I was about 30, actually 28, I devoted my life to what I'm doing today. And I've been watching and listening and trying to accumulate information that I can package and convey in about 20 hours. Now the thing of it is, a person can't come and in those 20 hours glean all that information and take it away and use it. And it's not fair to think that they could. What has to happen, actually what does happen, you go to an event, you listen to this show, for example, and there's some good ideas in some of these shows. In fact, every one of them has something in it that could make a positive difference in the direction your life is taking.
When the show's over, you turn the TV off, you roll over, you go to sleep, and the next morning you don't... Oh yeah, that was good. What was that about?
Exactly. And it's a tragedy because the shows are available. In other words, for example, we were on 4 times a week in the Sacramento market. It was on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday and Monday. And there's a select number of people in the community I know, I've heard, who watch it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday if they get a chance. And they really get more out of it because of the process of the mind. First of all, say for example, if you go to an event and you pick up, say 20 or 30 ideas, you're not going to be conscious of that, but they go on through the mind and embed themselves into the subconscious. You're really going to remember all of them. It's just that we have lousy recall, because we can't retrieve the information necessarily on a conscious level. What happens if a good bit of information will come in, embed itself in the subconscious mind, and hang out in there? Okay, it'll hang out and it'll bubble up, regurgitate itself, explode into reality only to survive with. Some years ago we had, we'll call him Harvey, it wasn't his name, but to protect the innocent. There was a young fellow, he was about 12 years old, was brought to one of the seminars by his mom. It was a life formula, as a matter of fact. And she was excited about it, came again to review it, brought him along. And he sat there and he doodled and, did what a 12-year-old, or at least what he thought what a 12-year-old was supposed to do. And after it was over, when they left, she said, "Well, Adam, how'd you like it?" And he's, "Oh, Mom, all those big words, and I didn't understand a thing he was saying. And, how much did you pay for that, Mom?" And at that time, she said $30. He says, oh, I could have had a T-shirt, I could have had this and that, you know. And she was disappointed, but thought, well, maybe he got something out of it. You know how we do. Mm-hmm. About 2 weeks later, she called the agent that had enrolled her and said, you won't believe what happened yesterday. Harvey it was, wasn't it? Harvey got in trouble at school. He was in trouble with the teachers, he was in trouble with his classmates, he was in deep trouble. And then he was telling me what happened, how he perceived it, what he said and did in order to get out of trouble. And she said, Stephen, he knew it all. He had the whole thing on the tip of his tongue. You know what I mean? In other words, it all come bubbling out when he needed it to maintain the status quo. Now, there's nothing wrong with surviving. You know what I mean? That's okay. But it's not enough when you have the capacity to thrive. If we're going to thrive, what we have to do is to go through a process and acknowledge a few things too. That if we say something on this show that could really make a positive difference, chances are we won't get it. Because the subconscious mind, being a status quo professional, okay, status quo pro, will take information and twist it into sameness. It's so easy for someone to say, oh, I've heard all this stuff before. I hear it a lot.
I hear it a lot also.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is they haven't heard it this particular way, okay? They've heard the words.
They refuse to hear it this way.
Exactly.
They refuse to understand it this way and make a difference.
And we say they, but it's not they entirely. It's that subconscious mind. It doesn't want to be tweaked, doesn't want to be inspired, doesn't want anything different. And so it clings to the sameness.
They is us often also.
Pardon?
They is us
Yeah,
also.
exactly. Well, you know what I mean? In other words, it's that we're not an entity where we got three things going on in here, and we've got to get that subconscious mind to quiet down and cooperate. And the only way to do that is to comfort it with review, to brush up against the same information a second time. Like Life Formula, we just did it here a few weeks ago, and it turned out to be a 5-week series. And a person could capture that video and watch it over and over again. But I've had people come live, 20, 25, 30, 35 times, and sit through the Life Formula and take notes every time, and have experiences each time that they'd never had before. Because it's a different person watching it. You know what I'm saying? In other words, and so the savoring, the nurturing of those ideas is the only thing that's going to make the difference. Find valuable information. Find information that you know somehow is going to make a good difference in your life, and then expose yourself to it over and over and over again. For example, in one of these shows or in a seminar, what will happen is kind of like if you're exposing yourself to new information, it's like cutting a new record. Remember the olden days, they had these waxen records, and they would drop a needle in and cut a groove. And then later they could retrace that, and it would make music or sound or whatever. Well, that's almost the way the mind works, although it's more digital now, like a digital recording. What happens when the information comes in, we take it in. And if we hear something that we've heard before, or that's comforting, that reassures us in some way, then we lift the needle. We lift the needle and bask in our awareness. It's very important for us to already know. And so we bask in awareness, celebrate that we know that, reassure ourselves that we've heard that before. But we've missed this. We haven't heard what goes on here. And then we drop the needle back in, and we hear something else that sounds pretty good, and so we go celebrate. Then we come back in later, and this time as we're listening, we hear something we've never heard before. A new word. That'll do it. Or a new definition, or a different perception, and we lift the needle and grouse about it. So, I don't know where that guy's coming from. I've never heard this before. I've lived for 40, 45 years, and I've gotten along fine without that. You know what I mean? We grouse about it, and then we drop the needle back in later, okay? And so in the first listening or viewing, there is an evaluation process that's going on. And, by the way, we can't criticize it because it's necessary. We should be evaluating what we see. I know people often brag about how open-minded they are, and I wonder perhaps in some cases if they're not so open-minded their brains fall out. You do have to be discerning and have to be concerned about what you're listening to.
You're evaluating things constantly, whether you want to or not.
Exactly.
You can't help do it. It's part of human being.
And so we can celebrate this and say, hey, that's okay, this is what happens. However, if we'll take that same information presented in the same way, that's one of the values of a book or a cassette tape. Now, in the seminars, when I do them, they're almost word for word. I would say in a 2-hour soliloquy is what I'm doing, that probably there's not a 2 or 3% difference in the words, the examples, the gestures, what I've employed. So when they come and review it, they're seeing essentially the same thing again. So in the second viewing, there is an assimilation that takes place. Assimilation. And I find this fascinating too. In that, they hear this and they're okay, and they stay. Okay? And then they hear this information, and then of course they hear this information in concert. And as they're beginning to fill in the gaps, there's assimilation of the material. Now they still might miss a few things along here, okay? But it's moving along. If they see it the third time, it's exciting. I mean, I can almost always tell the person in the audience who's there the third time, because it's time for illumination. You'll see people, just like, oh, I see what he's saying, the point that he's making, okay? Illumination. It's an exciting moment in time. And what it is now is a constant strain of information all the way through. Now, what happens for this is occurring all through here is collation. Collation. See, a lot of people think in terms of creative thinking, coming up with a new idea. Chances are that's not so. It's collative thinking. In other words, putting this bit of information with this bit of information and collating it into this bit of information.
Which is a very interesting point, because if you look back at some of the major inventions throughout the history of time, they took an idea that was used in one field and collated it with something completely different that they had experience with.
Exactly.
If you look at the printing press, it came from the weaving industry. Where did safety pins come? I was trying to invent something for a rifle. And it's on and on and on like that. So that's a very interesting point that you're making.
There's collation and then there's integration. In other words, to integrate means to connect old ideas with new ones and make sense out of them. So collation and integration has to occur in order for there to be illumination and then the ultimate implementation. See, once you start implementing the idea, this is a very exciting thing.
It's really difficult to implement something until you've sold out to the idea that
That's
it's
right.
really going to help you to be better.
Exactly.
It's not going to cause you to sacrifice something you're unwilling to give up,
Yeah.
like sleep or food or the basics.
Realization is an exciting moment in time. It's called breakthrough. This is where it really, really works, is breakthrough. Remember my definition for breakthrough? It's that moment in time when you realize you've got a solution. You've got a solution, didn't even know you had a problem. See, a lot of people out here feel that the way their life is working, however that happens to be, is the way it works. You know what I mean? And when they come to an event like this and they have a breakthrough, it's like there's a whole new life and they didn't even know they had the problem. It's an exciting moment in time. Usually, a breakthrough doesn't occur, though, without implementation. There has to be a kinetic involvement. In other words, you have to be, verbal or visual or audio or physical in doing something and realize, hey, this is working. This makes a difference. And so now you have a chance for the next great step, which is actualization. Actualization. And actualization satisfies the libido, in that what it really means is that you continue to live through someone else by conveying this information that you've accumulated. In other words, this is your new reality, and you pass it on. It's an exciting process. One thing that we teach in seminar, it's kind of fascinating too, the way it works, is that you can accelerate this by being a great listener. See, most of us really don't listen very well, in that if there's something going on that could make a difference, the subconscious mind will whisk us away. It'll take us to tomorrow, to yesterday. It'll take us downtown, uptown, back home. And what it really is an avoidance of information. One of the things we've tried to avoid, we've commented about this before, is that we have a very plain set. So that the mind won't go scooting off and wondering, is that a real window? Or are those real plants, or what's in that book, or There's nothing to distract, and so hopefully people are watching head, hands, and listening to words, strictly words. I know I enjoy talking heads. I'd rather watch a talking head than a sitcom. But the thing of it is, I've learned how to listen too, and to assimilate. And I'm working all the time, and it's a joy to do it. But what I do, essentially, are you familiar with rearticulation? Have we talked about that?
I think it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's the mind's capacity. It's really kind of that a person can rearticulate what another person is saying very comfortably. For example, I talk at about 120 words a minute with gust up to 200 if I get really exciting. a person can re-articulate at about 1,200 words a minute. And what that means is to be able to re-articulate, say, mimic, if you would, in your mind, everything that a person is saying in the same instant that they're saying it. For example, if our viewing audience right now, in the next few minutes, would just sit there and mimic in their mind, say the same words that I'm saying at the same pace that I'm saying them, say essentially every single syllable, okay? You hear every word.
So they repeat after you.
You're repeating it. And it seems like a busy way of listening, but the fact of the matter is that when you are re-articulating, at least a piece of the mind has to be focused. And we know that when we focus, when we can get into the moment, that's a nice state to be in. First of all, our energy level goes up, our stamina is increased, and our retentive ability is enhanced. We have people who come to the seminar and walk away after re-articulating and say they can't believe how much they actually remembered of what happened in the seminar.
Really?
Yeah, much more so than normal, because you're not lifting that needle all the time. You're right there with it. Now, the fact is, like I say, 120, 200 words a minute, but if you can re-articulate 1,200 words a minute, all right, now that means you got 1,000 words a minute to continue doing your evaluating and your grousing. You know what I mean? In other words, yeah. In other words,
see a lot more going on.
Yeah. So the little private seminar that goes in the mind can continue even though you're going through this process. I would think that probably the key to progress is surrendering to the idea that if you hear something valuable, something meaningful, something worthwhile to go to. Now, for example, the best seminar, the best essay, the best experience a person could possibly have is to go back to the same seminar he went to last month, in all probability, until they could pre-articulate. Now, until you can say it, it's not really yours. It's yours for survival. I mean, it'll bubble up when you need it, but see, I mean, thriving is...
But you don't own the material.
Yeah, it's so much more valuable to thrive with something instead of just kind of existing with it. A lot of people say, well, I go to seminars and I just don't seem to get anything out of it, it doesn't make a difference. Well, it's because you're not savoring it, you're not swishing that information around in your mind, you're not examining it, applying it. And it's really kind of fascinating because the material doesn't change. It's just that every time you hear it, there's a different person listening. Because every time you hear it, it does have an impact. For example, just listening to this material, a person's life that's watching this can never be exactly the same as it was before they started the show. A little bit of information, okay, makes a difference in the direction your life can be heading. Now, if they listen to it 2 or 3 times to the point where they could do the show, now it's theirs. Now it's theirs. And there's a matter of perception. See, one of the things through repetition and what have you, you can actually expand your perceptions. One of the things, I don't have one with me tonight, but oftentimes in a seminar I'll have like a toilet paper tube or just a paper towel tube, and you kind of look through it, you know, and like I can see you and I can see our viewer, and I can go over here and see someone else like Jeff or whatever, and I can see them clearly. However, if I'm looking at you, the viewer could say or do something that could affect my whole life.
And you wouldn't see it.
And wouldn't even see it until it was too late. That's a very subjective feeling, see? But if I can broaden my perspective, even maybe just really broaden it, then I can still see you just as clearly as before, but now I can see the viewer and I can see Jeff. See what I'm saying? In other words, it gives you a bigger, better handle on life and living. And so re-articulating or reviewing broadens the perspective and gives you a different angle. For example, say you have a subject or an idea here. The first listening, you're seeing it from this perspective. See? And the second listening is kind of like seeing it from this perspective. It's going to be a little bit different, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then the third time, if you see it from this perspective, it's going to be totally different. And then if you see it from this perspective, it'll be totally different. After a while, you really got it. You know what that's about. But if you don't review, okay, it's kind of like if you're going to have to take a test. Von Sant, this person who used to write in Parade magazine, the highest IQ'd person in the world. You familiar with her? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. She said that if you're going to have to take a test, read the book, cover to cover, and then go back and read the book again. And then read the book again and take the test. You won't have any trouble. It's that third viewing because of evaluation, assimilation, and illumination. Once you got it, you can do it. I don't know if I mentioned earlier in the show or not, but we've had people go through Life Formula 20, 25, 30 times. I've always been fascinated by that. I appreciate it. I honor the investment they've made. and to think that the material is that meaty, that it warrants going through that. Like this show that we did here on Life Formula, those 5 shows. I mean, if a person could have that in their library and plug it in and watch one show at a time and keep watching it, I mean, there has to be a difference in that person's life.
Bern, I have kind of a question, maybe devil's advocate kind of question for you. What about the people who know the material and they know what they need to do and they don't?
Okay,
And every day they say, I know I need to stop smoking.
Right.
They know what it takes to stop smoking, or eating too much, or getting up and exercising in the morning, or doing the laundry so you have clothes to wear on time. And they know better. They know how to do it. They're very familiar with it, but they just don't do it.
One of two things, a lack of inspiration or a lack of disgust.
So there's not a strong enough motivation.
Right. In other words, that person hasn't really been inspired to believe that they can be free, or they haven't reached their day of disgust. See, my experience has been that a lot of people that have been very successful in my life, incredibly so, had a day. They've been neglecting and adapting, reacting, accommodating, and getting by. Mm-hmm. But things got worse and worse and worse and worse. In other words, because if you're not making adjustments, you'll be adapting.
Or else their tolerance becomes.
Yeah, their tolerance broadens and they kind of embrace it. Mm-hmm. But pretty soon there's a point that some people hit. Some people never do, perhaps, but some people hit a day of disgust where they say, never again. I will not endure this. I can do better, and they begin to shift. Okay, I notice, for example, I'll go through stages where I will gain a certain amount of weight. It's evidently a natural propensity of mine. I came from a family that if you weren't big, you were sick. You know what I mean? Back on the farm up in New Hampshire years ago, I mean, you would be considered a sickly person. Yeah, you had to be robust. You got to be big. And so it was eat all you can, dessert every meal, 3 meals a day, snacks at night. That's just the way it was. And so I had all those fat corpuscles in me, and they're just waiting for me to mess up. But anyway, about 3-4 years ago, I just got to a point where I had trouble tying my shoelaces. I had trouble moving. I just wasn't feeling right. And I don't know what it was. Just one day I said, no more. No more. And that day I went into a regimen, and the following year lost 90 pounds, got to the point where I could run 6 miles every morning, just felt fantastic, and had some difficulties with physical difficulties, and I had to stop running and what have you, and so the body goes, I gotcha, you know what I mean, and you began to put on some weight again. Now I'm back in it again because I reached another day of disgust. I don't know that some of us will stay that way forever, and I always think, I'll never again. Mm-hmm. You think that way. But we do know, too, that if there's any part of your life that ever existed, some experience or perception or attitude, it's always there. It never erases. It's part of our consideration process. And sometimes, if it's ignored, it can come back and take over again. This is what addiction is about. In other words, the fact that the subconscious mind, having had that experience, will probably have moments when it wants it again. And if you're not consciously aware of it, it'll get you.
Because there's something comforting in that experience
exactly.
For your subconscious mind.
For the subconscious mind, no matter what it is, good or bad, oddly enough.
So which do you think is a stronger motivation, disgust or inspiration?
Good question. Inspiration is healthier because you can be in a good place and be inspired to do more. But disgust, when it hits you, boy, it can be pretty motivational, if you would, the day of disgust. It's a fascinating subject. Now, I wouldn't suggest that a person purposely move in that direction, hoping that will happen, because they may end up in a Dempsey dumpster. I've seen that happen too. Right. But I know that I know a lot of very successful people who have stories that will make you cry, things that they allowed their lives to depress to. Okay, that all of a sudden they said no more, never again, and they began to make their forward move. Inspiration. It was once said that there's no such thing as a lazy man. No such thing as a lazy man. But there are many who are uninspired. And I really believe that. I think laziness is a state of the mind, not a reality.
I think a lot of it has to do with belief also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get inspired, you begin to realize that, hey, maybe I could. And you get a certain amount of nurturance and support from having. I've seen miracles occur. In fact, I've had a lot of them in my life. Young people who are literally on the street without the education, without the so-called tools, and they got inspired and just, soared with the kind of information that we live around. And it's been fun in that sense of the word. Something else? Question? It's your show. Yeah.
Well, We're talking here about evaluating new information, then being able to assimilate it into our patterns of thinking, so that the time comes when we have a new way of thinking, a new approach to life, which is illumination. Then we have to implement those ideas. And I think that's a place where, for a lot of us, we really struggle. And I know that in my life, I do tend to go to a lot of seminars, and I try to learn things, and sometimes I'm at the point where I could give the lecture. I know the information well enough, and I know how to do it even theoretically. But getting home and implementing it in your life, when the weekend or the evening is over, going home, and you're back in the same place. And it's almost as if that were just a dream.
Yeah.
All that excitement, the enthusiasm, that I know I can do it. You get home and you have the same mess staring at you that is your life. I mean, not mess that is maybe horrible, but just the same struggles, the same frustrations, the same circumstances, and most of all, I think the same habits. How do you get into a different place?
The only chance you got, the only hope there is compartmentalization and predetermination.
And what do you mean by that?
Okay, in other words, breaking your life into small segments of time. Like if you got to clean a room, you can't clean a room. The room will stay messy forever. You got to clean that 3-foot corner. You know what I mean? And say, I'm going to spend 10 minutes cleaning that 3-foot corner. Okay, if you'll do that, there's a chance, not promise, but there's a chance you clean 9 square feet in an hour. And you get caught in it. And you celebrate the result. If you get conscious of completions, that creates energy for more activity. It's a really fascinating thing, but if you take on a big task, you may never even start. It's really, really challenging. There's a lot to talk about. All the information we've conveyed in the last 69 shows, and hopefully we'll convey in the next 60, is about this kind of thing. Life, living, making it easier, better, and more productive. And to call and visit with us and get some materials, get invited to our live seminar, you just call, what is it, 1-800-661-3490. And my name is Byrne. I'll sneak it in down here. And the last name is?
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Byrne.
It's more help than you think.